The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under my door like a snake in the grass. 23 years of marriage reduced to legal jargon and my husband's forged signature, a signature I'd never seen before, because he'd never signed them. The papers were addressed to a woman I'd never heard of, living at an address that was supposed to be our home. My name is Claire Morrison, and at 52 I thought I knew the shape of my life. I was a senior editor at a literary magazine in Portland, Oregon, living in the Victorian house my husband David and I had restored together over 2 decades. Our marriage had weathered the usual storms: financial stress, career changes, the quiet disappointment of childlessness we'd never quite discussed. But I believed in us. I believed in the solidity of our shared silences, our Sunday morning crosswords, the way he still brought me coffee in bed on lazy Saturdays. That Tuesday morning shattered everything I thought I knew about trust. The papers trembled in my hands as I read them twice, then 3 times. The plaintiff was listed as Miranda Castellanos, David's ex-girlfriend from college, the one he'd mentioned casually over the years. "She's doing well," he'd say after running into mutual friends. "Living in California now, I think." The defendant was listed as David Morrison, my husband, residing at our address. But according to these documents, Miranda and David had been married for 18 months. I sat on our kitchen floor, still in my robe, surrounded by the morning light that suddenly felt foreign in my own home. The coffee maker gurgled its familiar tune, but nothing else made sense. How do you discover that your husband is a bigamist through divorce papers meant for someone else? How do you process that the man you've shared a bed with for over 2 decades has been living an entirely separate life? My hands found my phone before my mind could stop them. David was at a conference in Seattle, or so he'd told me. The call went straight to voicemail. His voice, warm and familiar, asking callers to leave a message, made my stomach turn. How many lies had that voice told me? I called his office. "Mr. Morrison is taking some personal time," his assistant said. "He'll be back next week." Personal time. The phrase echoed in my head as I stumbled upstairs to our bedroom. Everything looked the same: his books stacked on the nightstand, his reading glasses folded neatly beside them, the framed photo of us from our 10th anniversary trip to Tuscany. But now these objects felt like props in an elaborate deception. I opened his dresser drawers with shaking hands, not sure what I was looking for. In the back of his sock drawer, beneath layers of wool and cotton, my fingers found a phone I'd never seen before. A cheap flip phone, the kind people use when they don't want to be traced. I turned it on with trembling fingers. The text messages told a story I wasn't prepared for. Messages to Miranda spanning months: "Missing you already. Can't wait to get home to you. Claire's at work late again. Perfect for us." And then, the one that made me vomit into our shared bathroom sink: "She has no idea. After all these years she still trusts me completely. It's almost too easy." I spent that day moving through our house like a ghost, seeing everything differently. The business trips that had become more frequent, the new cologne I'd complimented him on, the way he'd started going to bed after me, claiming he needed to catch up on work emails. All of it, lies. 23 years of my life built on a foundation that had never existed. By evening, I had assembled the pieces of David's double life, with the methodical precision I usually reserved for editing manuscripts. He'd been traveling to California twice a month, telling me it was for work consultations. He'd married Miranda in a small ceremony in Las Vegas 18 months ago, using a fake address in San Francisco. He'd been supporting 2 households, which explained the financial stress he'd attributed to market fluctuations. He'd been living as 2 different men, the devoted husband in Portland, and the passionate new husband in Los Angeles. The rage came in waves. Not the hot, impulsive anger I'd expected, but something colder, more deliberate. I felt it settling in my bones like winter frost, crystallizing into something sharp and purposeful. David had stolen more than just my trust. He'd stolen years of my life, my sense of reality, my ability to believe in my own perceptions. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my laptop and began to write. Not a confrontational letter, or a plea for explanation, but something else entirely. I wrote the truth, plainly and without embellishment, in the clear prose style that had made my career. I wrote about discovering your life is a lie. I wrote about the particular cruelty of being betrayed by someone you've shared decades with. I wrote about the way deception makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. When I finished, I had a 2,000-word essay that laid out David's betrayal with journalistic precision. I included dates, evidence, the text messages I'd photographed. I wrote about Miranda, who I realized was as much a victim as I was, believing herself to be married to a divorced man. I wrote about the friends and family who would need to know, the legal complications, the financial entanglements. I wrote about the particular devastation of middle-age betrayal, when you thought you were past the age of having your foundations destroyed. But I didn't publish it yet. Instead, I spent the next day consulting with lawyers, gathering documentation, and preparing for David's return. I wanted to understand the full scope of what he'd done before I decided how to respond. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Janet Chen, listened to my story with professional composure. "Bigamy is a felony," she said, matter-of-factly. "Even if he divorces one of you immediately, he still committed a crime, and the financial fraud implications are significant. I don't want to destroy him." I found myself saying, though I wasn't sure it was true, "I just want the truth to come out." Janet raised an eyebrow. "After what he's done, you'd be justified in wanting to destroy him. But I understand the impulse towards something more measured." That evening, David called. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that now made my skin crawl. "Conference is going well. I'll be home tomorrow night." "How's Miranda?" I asked quietly. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, his voice came back, different now, careful. "What did you say?" "I asked how Miranda is doing, your wife." Another silence. Then "Claire, I can explain." I hung up. 30 minutes later he called back. I didn't answer. He called 6 more times over the next hour, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. "Please let me explain. It's not what you think. I love you, Claire. I've always loved you." The last one was just him crying. I turned off my phone and returned to my essay. I revised it, refined it, made it sharper and more precise. I fact-checked every detail, verified every date. Then I submitted it to the Atlantic's online platform, where I'd published personal essays before. They accepted it within hours. The piece went live Thursday morning with the headline, "When you discover your husband is a bigamist, a personal account." I'd used our real names, included the documentation I'd found, and written with the kind of unflinching honesty that makes readers uncomfortable. I'd also reached out to Miranda beforehand, calling her to warn her that the truth was about to become public. "You're David's wife?" she'd asked. Her voice high and confused. "But he said he was divorced." "He showed me papers. We talked for 2 hours." She was 38, a marketing executive, and she'd met David at a conference 3 years ago. He'd courted her for months, telling her he was recently divorced and looking for a fresh start. She'd believed him completely, just as I had believed his lies about business trips. "I'm going to leave him," she said quietly. I can't be married to someone who would do this. "I'm publishing an essay about all of this," I told her. "I wanted you to know." "Good," she said, and I heard steel in her voice. "He shouldn't be able to hide from what he's done." The essay exploded across social media within hours. It was shared thousands of times, commented on by hundreds of people who'd experienced similar betrayals. Local news stations picked it up. David's law firm was flooded with calls. His professional reputation, built over decades, crumbled in a single day. By Friday morning he was at my door. I almost didn't recognize him. The confident man I'd been married to for 23 years had been replaced by someone hollow-eyed and desperate. He looked like he'd slept in his car, which I later learned he had. "Claire, please," he said through the screen door. "Let me come in. Let me explain." I studied his face, the face I'd woken up next to for thousands of mornings. "There's nothing to explain, David. I know everything. You don't understand. I understand that you committed bigamy. I understand that you've been lying to me for years. I understand that you made me complicit in fraud without my knowledge." My voice was steady, almost clinical. "What I don't understand is why." He broke down then, sobbing on my front porch like a child. "I don't know," he kept saying. "I don't know why I did it. I love you, I've always loved you. But Miranda, she made me feel young again. She made me feel like someone different." "So you became someone different. You became a criminal." "Claire, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. I'll divorce her immediately. We can start over." I looked at this man who'd shared my life for over 2 decades, and I felt nothing but a vast, echoing sadness. Not for him, but for the time I'd lost, the trust that could never be rebuilt, the woman I'd been who had believed in us. David, I said gently. You killed our marriage the day you married someone else. There's no coming back from that. The legal proceedings took months. David was charged with bigamy and faced potential jail time, though he eventually plea bargained to probation and community service. The financial untangling was complex. He'd used joint assets to support his double life, which constituted fraud against both Miranda and me. He lost his license to practice law, and had to liquidate most of his assets to settle the civil suits. Miranda and I became unlikely allies through the process. We met for coffee once a week, two women navigating the aftermath of David's deception. She was stronger than I'd expected, rebuilding her life with a determination I admired. I keep thinking about the signs I missed, she said one afternoon, stirring her latte absently. The way he never wanted me to visit Portland, how he always had excuses for why I couldn't meet his friends from work. I missed them too, I said. Or maybe I chose not to see them. Sometimes I think we believe what we need to believe to keep our worlds intact. The essay continued to resonate with readers. I received hundreds of emails from people who'd experienced similar betrayals, and I began writing more about the aftermath of deception, the process of rebuilding trust in yourself, when someone you love has systematically lied to you. A book deal followed, then speaking engagements. My personal catastrophe became a source of income, and unexpectedly, purpose. David tried to contact me several times over the months that followed. Letters of apology that I returned unopened. Emails that I blocked. He sent flowers on our anniversary, which I donated to a women's shelter. I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved to his brother's house in Denver, was working as a paralegal, was in therapy. I felt nothing when I learned these things. He'd become a stranger to me, someone I'd once known but no longer recognized. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the legal complications. It was learning to trust my own perceptions again. For months I second-guessed everything, every memory, every conversation, every moment of happiness we'd shared. Had any of it been real? Had he ever truly loved me, or had I been just another role in his elaborate performance? Dr. Sarah Winters, the therapist I started seeing, helped me work through these questions. Betrayal trauma is unique, she explained during one of our sessions. It's not just the loss of the relationship, it's the loss of your sense of reality. You're not just grieving the end of your marriage, you're grieving the version of your marriage you thought you had. How do I trust anyone again? I asked her. How do I trust myself? You start small, she said. You learn to trust your ability to make good decisions in small matters, then gradually work up to bigger ones. You learn to trust friends who've proven themselves trustworthy. You learn to trust your instincts again by paying attention to them and honoring what they tell you. It took time, longer than I expected, but shorter than I feared. I sold the Victorian house, too many ghosts, and bought a small cottage near the coast. I kept working at the magazine, but also began freelancing, writing essays about recovery and resilience. I adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Riley, who had trust issues of his own. We worked on healing together. 2 years after that Tuesday morning I was standing on the beach near my new home, watching Riley chase seagulls in the surf. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, and I realized I was content. Not happy in the uncomplicated way I'd once been, but content in a deeper, more durable way. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, a man I'd been seeing for a few months. He was a divorced professor, kind and patient, who understood that I approached relationships differently now. Still on for dinner tomorrow? He asked. Yes, I texted back and meant it. I was learning to trust again, carefully and deliberately. Not with the blind faith I'd once had, but with eyes wide open. The essay I'd written in my darkest hour had become something I was proud of, not because it had destroyed David, but because it had told the truth. The responses from readers had taught me that betrayal, while devastating, wasn't rare. Most people had experienced some version of what I'd gone through. The courage to speak about it, to name it clearly and without euphemism, had helped others feel less alone. I thought about David sometimes, usually with a kind of distant sadness, not for what we'd lost, but for what we'd never really had. He'd been so afraid of being ordinary, of being the middle-aged husband in a comfortable but unremarkable marriage, that he'd chosen to become something much worse, a liar, a fraud, a man who'd destroyed 3 lives for the illusion of excitement. As Riley bounded back to me, sand flying from his paws, I reflected on the strange gifts that betrayal had given me. It had stripped away my illusions but left me with something more valuable, a clear-eyed understanding of my own strength, a deeper appreciation for authentic relationships, and the knowledge that I could survive having my world destroyed and build something better from the pieces. The waves crashed against the shore in their eternal rhythm, indifferent to human drama, but somehow comforting in their constancy. I walked back to my cottage as the stars emerged, Riley trotting beside me, both of us scarred but whole, both of us learning what it meant to trust again. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was simply the truth, told clearly and without flinching. Sometimes it was the quiet satisfaction of building a life based on reality, rather than illusion. Sometimes it was the peace that comes from knowing you've survived the worst thing you could imagine, and discovered you're stronger than you knew. In the end, David had given me something he'd never intended, the gift of knowing exactly who I was when everything else was stripped away. It wasn't the gift I would have chosen, but it was mine, and I'd learned to value it. The cottage was warm when I entered, filled with the simple comfort of a life lived honestly. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened a book, and settled into my chair by the window. Outside, the ocean continued its ancient conversation with the shore, and inside, I was finally home.